So my name is Simon Kim. I'm associate professor at the University of Pennsylvania, the Weitzman School of Design. I've been there now 12 years. I started in 2009, and I currently run a lab called Immersive Kinematics. That is something that I co-direct with an engineer, a roboticist named Mark Yim. I am also the co-founder of Ibañez Kim. That's a design office that I run with my partner, Mariana Ibañez. We established that first in London, and then it migrated to the US with us. But we really began in earnest in 2012. I began studying architecture in first year university. This is in Ottawa, Canada. It wasn't my first choice, you know. I thought I was going to be like many Asian children, second generation. I thought I was going to be a doctor or a lawyer, as my parents requested. But I discovered that I'm no good with medical fields. I volunteered at a local hospital, and I didn't enjoy it at all. So, given that that was my senior year of high school, I had to make very quick decisions. So I decided in the end I was going to become an architect through the recommendation of a friend, because I did not know what architecture was or what that was as a field. So I quickly looked up what the requirements were, and it required a portfolio and a transcript. I didn't have a portfolio, but I was active in the creative arts all through high school. So while I was taking my biology and while I was taking my physics and chemistry, I was also taking art classes. So it was very easy to put together a portfolio. Back in 1989, that meant that I took photographs of paintings and photographs of plaster sculptures that I made in my teenage years. Luckily, I was accepted. So I entered my first year of the Bachelor of Architecture program. So there's not too many of these 5-year programs that are around anymore. They've largely gone from professional 5-year to 4+2. Where I consider home and the places that I lived will be a long form story. It's going to land on many different places. I was born in Seoul, Korea. And then when I was young, my parents and I moved to Toronto, Canada. And then because it was a little difficult, they didn't realize what it would take. They couldn't keep me in Canada, so they sent me back. So I went back to Korea alone on an airplane. In 1971, that was totally possible that you can send babies alone on airplanes. So apparently a stewardess looked after me and shepherded me back to Seoul, where my grandparents picked me up at the airport. So that was an unusual beginning. And then my grandparents and my aunt, with whom I grew up, they immigrated to Canada then. And at that point, there were other siblings. And then when I went to Ottawa, as I mentioned, for my undergrad, even then I knew that I wanted to go and do more. There's something about your childhood home that propels you to get away. Know that maybe there's a certain unease in many creative people, or maybe there's a desire to see the world and to see your place in the world, to discover your capabilities and what opportunities that you may find. So I knew I wasn't going to stay in Canada. So shortly after I finished my first degree, I moved to Hong Kong. And I had a really good time in Hong Kong. I worked and I played and I visited. I went to many places like island hopping to Bali, to Singapore, to the Philippines, and then having spent a few years in the southeast of Asia, I returned to North America and went to Las Vegas. So Las Vegas presented all other kinds of challenges and pleasures. I became licensed as an architect in Las Vegas. I was working on the airport. There was quite a few projects at this airport, so I spent a lot of time. I got a lot of education, and I got a lot of experience doing this, and certainly in project management, actually. So I got my first license, and then I also got licensed in California. So I then, with that same office, TSK, went to Los Angeles to work on a CSULA student center. So I actually was living in Westwood and basically working in, what's it called, Century City, right? The towers that you can see over there. And so I was there for a number of years. But the dream of going to grad school never left. So I recognized that if I wanted to see how good I really was, I would have to take that next step. So I had two options. It was either going to be Columbia University in New York, which at that time was doing something called Paperless Studio with very good faculty. And then the other option was the Architectural Association in London. And as in many other circumstances in my life, it just happened that the AA had a different schedule for applications. So I applied first to the AA, and then Columbia was going to be several months later, because in America, the deadlines are sometimes in December, January. But I discovered that I was accepted to the AA very early. And this was a time when Moise Mustafavi was the chair of the school, and Brett Steele was the director of the DRL program. So I went there, I visited both schools, and I went to the DRL. I thought it was fantastic. And so it was not a tough decision to decide to go to the DRL. So I went there, I met Mariana there, and I flourished. I was able to work at SOM in London during the summer and a part-time. And then I went to work for Zaha Hadid directly after. But in terms of my home, and I'll become maybe a little bit more nostalgic about it, I find myself with many identities, and it is always context-driven. And I'm sure this is true for many people, certainly creative people, where you find yourself in different contexts, you find yourself in different circumstances, and you adjust to those. But in terms of core values, perhaps I could say I'm a hybrid of Asian and North American, but it's a difficult hybrid. It's, I would say it's more Frankenstein than it is a kind of cohesive whole. So there's parts of being Asian that I'm not very comfortable with, and that would be a lot of the obeisance or the hierarchies of Asian culture, of deference to your elders or to what sex you are or the experiences that you have. And I've never really liked that, and I actually appreciate the part in the US where there's a certain kind of, well, I mean, there is hierarchy, but there is also the ability in finding flatness. And I think that's based on language. So you and I, we can speak in any number of ways, but it's never going to be the same like in Korean, where there is something called banmal, and there's something called jondenmal, and there's something even higher when you speak with royalty or the president. And that is an inflection of power systems, where friend to friend, you can speak in a certain way, but friend to employer, There has to be a completely different agreement, a social contract that one is less than the other. And so it's not just the language, it's also the culture. It's also how you feel about each other. So I'm not sure that I really like that. And I've never really been good at speaking Chondenmar, maybe because I have this friction with it. But there is great things about being Asian. There is the idea that there is a community more than just the individual, where I think here there's this crazy idea of the exceptionalism in the US, this culture of exceptionalism. Everyone's amazing. And to a certain degree, I think it's great to feel that way, but then there's also a certain need to understand that we all occupy the same piece of earth and that we should be a bit more accommodating, a bit more accepting to others. And in this way, I think that my predilections have been in inclusion towards all. So, I don't know if you ever experienced racism or discrimination in this country or other places, but it's an issue. It's an issue in architecture, and I like to think that there is capacities to accept other narratives, Arab stories, Latino stories, transgender stories, and it's certainly the right time to start broadening our domain. To be able to travel and to be able to see the world, there is a certain privilege to that. Not everyone can do it, and I find the more that I travel and the more places I see, I don't know. There's a humility that comes with it. There's no way I can maintain a kind of modernist idea that there is one matrix of truth that can be applied everywhere. I think that there's a lot of localities and contexts that have any myriad number of truths and cultural relevance that isn't necessarily bound towards what I would call Western Eurocentric culture. No, in architecture, we're all trained to enjoy basilicas because basilicas have a certain axis of symmetry, a certain positioning of structure that leads you into the glory of the holy, and that doesn't leave a lot of room and space for other cultural semblances of power and glory and deification, if I could use that word. There's any number of religions, there's any numbers of cultures that at any given moment have equal ability to convey through architecture social meaning and affect. Yes. So, Asiel, earlier you were mentioning that you're an architect, but you're also a musician. And I saw on your Instagram page that you do play music. I am also a musician. I am not a professional one. No one is paying me. But I do. A large part of my life is design. A large part of my life is also playing guitar. And another part of my life is the activities that I enjoy. Snowboarding. I just learned how to surf, so I'm really excited to be in Los Angeles now, where I can hit the waves. So one of my childhood idols, and he remains an idol to this day, from teenagers to now that I'm in my 50s, is Jimi Hendrix. There was a very short period that he lived, and in that short period, he broke a world. He broke the world of what electric guitar could be. And very few people that came after him have done the same. Maybe Eddie Van Halen is also in that picture, where Eddie went beyond the blues that Hendrix was doing and beyond the psychedelia, but took on the electric guitar through his tapping and speed into unknown territories. In architecture, I will say that Zaha Hadid has been a mentor. I knew her directly. I worked for her, and I taught with Zaha at Yale University. She taught there 3 times over 10 years. And each one of those times I was her co-instructor. It was a pleasure to do so. And I loved that I could learn, even as someone who was supposed to be teaching, that I could learn from her, continue to be guided by what she had to say. She was a raw, almost ineffable talent, like irrefutable, perhaps without limit. She was so good at sensing and promoting design in ways that weren't there before. No, in the same way that I would say Hendrix was. Frank Gehry is probably another person who was like this, and I was lucky to work for Frank as well. And when she died, it was a huge blow for Mariana and me, both of us. It was the loss of a friend, it was a loss of a mentor, a loss of someone who really supported us, because sitting here across from you, there is no small part of this that Zaha did not play a part in. You know, for me to get my position, to be able to be placed in certain arenas was through her. And I would say, actually, for anyone who wants to teach and who wants to work, networks are so important. No, I mean, you know, no one gets to be a student and then become faculty without building a network of support, right? You know, you can be talented, but if no one wants to nurture that, then it's going to be a much harder road. So I've really been lucky with having the right support and mentorship in my career. And to this day, I still would like more mentors. It's interesting, the mentor that you choose, right? And that, for me, one of those would be Hanif Kara. Are you familiar with AKT or Adams Kara Taylor? Hanif, I met him. He also taught at the AA with someone named Ciro Nakhle, and they had a great studio. So Hanif also is a wizard with structural engineering as well as design. He has no shortage of design talent. I worked with him professionally at Zaha's office on several projects, and he was probing. It was never a kind of solution space where he would take what I gave him and figure out the right span or the right thickness or the material capacities. And we continued our relationship. So I'm lucky to consider him a friend now. And whenever I speak with him, it is like a mentor, like you and I sitting, where he'll tell me what he's doing, and from his, and it's not necessarily advice, but from just sitting with him, I feel refreshed and I feel motivated. So Hanif has been great. When I'm teaching somebody, there's a certain, and I know you know this as well, there's a certain edge, right? So I maintain my professionalism as faculty to my students, and I make sure that they are getting the right pedagogical instruction. After they're my student, however, when they finish school and they continue to keep in touch with me, I am happy to tell them everything I know, as much as that may be, right? In ways that they can excel, or opportunities that they may not see, and that I can say this would be a good thing to do at this moment. So yes, for everyone who was a mentor to me, I try to do the same for those that I teach. And you know, and just being able to teach is such a thrill. Like, I love teaching, but becoming faculty, there's no roadmap as to how to become faculty. It's not like there's a website that you can go to and there's steps to do and then you can get hired at a university. It's all very nebulous. Hence the reason why you need a good network, and you need a theoretical project, and also a practice, right, where you can conduct your work. And so for me, I had just finished the AA and I was working at Zaha's, and that was, not a 9-to-5 job. It was, sometimes you don't go home. Sometimes you go home to change, maybe shower if you have time. But I was also trying very hard to become a teacher as well, because by this point, I had, everyone has short-term, long-term goals. And my short-term goal was to make it into teaching at least a workshop or something at the AA, and then to be able to say I am a both practitioner and instructor, right? Because that's the magic dual domain. So I needed to get to that level, and so I was hustling, trying to find teaching work. And it's not like anybody will hire some fresh kid that just finished his master's degree. So I was, asking anyone and anybody, anywhere, if they needed help doing digital workshops. Because at that moment, I was fairly good at Maya, this 3D animation software. This is in 2003. And Ciro Nachle, who is now the dean of the Escuela de Torcuato in Buenos Aires, I apologize for ruining that pronunciation. He let me have a chance. So I taught digital workshops for him. And that was when he was teaching with Hanif. And that led to other workshops for Nick Puckett, also at the AA, teaching first year. And it was like a slow buildup of basically chances and opportunities. And then ultimately, once I got to my second graduate degree at MIT, by that point, I had worked for Zaha for 4 years. I had taught multiple workshops at different schools. And so when I graduated from MIT, I was able to teach first semester core studio, which is huge. I mean, Nader Tarani really took a chance. And so, and that was my entry into US-based teaching. Yeah, I've been fortunate to teach at several institutions. So I mentioned Yale earlier, that I co-taught with Zaha. I also have taught at Harvard University with Mariana, and I also taught at University of Calgary for Jason Johnson. I've taught at the University of Toronto, also with Mariana. At Penn, I have a research lab, and I have a research seminar and an option studio. That is my domain, no? So in those domains, my interest in architecture now falls to the very specific architecture that is of social equity and justice, but also trained towards synthetic nature, or architecture in the realm of non-human agency. So it's you, it's me, it's this terrace, it's the overhang, but it's also the birds, and it's also these plants. So I don't want to continue talking about architecture in the 20th century modernity of human-centric design, largely based on European values, and then broadcast all over the world, right, through CM or international style. I want to now start to dislocate that and say, why couldn't we talk about duration and things that change, right? With open eco-intelligence to have this plant, that tree, birds, be equal occupants in the world that we are calling architecture. So it is very much a flattened plane where it's not humans at the top and everything subservient below us. I believe that is a failed model. And I want to say that there is now a kind of network assembly where we are no more important than frogs and crows. There's a family of crows living near me. And that we can occupy architecture in the same manner. So that means that architecture actually doesn't get smaller and more compartmentalized. It actually increases in dimensions. Like there is space for humans, but there's also space for non-humans, right? Imagine now that in your building, you can have spaces that are smaller than what we might enter into, but it has all the potential to be an aviary. You know? And so I delight in thinking about architecture in this manner because it points to future-proofing where we can start to become better stewards of how we build and how we live that allows for more occupancy than just ourselves, our material things, and a certain late capitalist system that is continuously running. So yes, I'm a small business owner, and I have a stamp, and I maintain my license. But beyond that, no one helps us promote the office, and no one helps us get projects. So everything we have to learn as business people. Like in school, I took professional practice, and that was really it. But to be a business owner requires so much more. And so I learned now that, Mariana is very good at different parts of the office, and I'm very good at other parts of the office. And so we build up on our strengths and we support each other. And that's been great for us. I would say if you were going to be a sole practitioner, that you have to encompass all things within your body. So at some point, you have to deal with a raging contractor who refuses to accept your RFIs, or to draw a conclusion to say, okay, design development is over. We cannot keep working, right? I cannot keep paying people to keep designing when now I have to invoice. So that's the realism of architecture across the world. Any architect has to deal with these things. But in terms of locations, we really enjoyed our time in London. It was amazing. London was in the early 2000s. It was a time when there were many people from all over the world, right? From Peru, from Argentina, Brazil, and then in other parts from Asia, from Africa, from Australia, right? So we all met in London. I think there was a statistic then that out of 10 Londoners, 7 were international. And now I think it's different with Brexit, and that the complexion of that society has completely shifted. But back then it was a very exciting time. Also, architecture was a little bit more enthralled with the digital procedure, right? I think now maybe it's a bit jaded, but back then, we all thought that we could mass customize, that we can use genetic algorithms to produce unknown architecture that we had not seen before. And so that was also with, oh my God, the time of great global expansion. Architects were high-flying superstars. Zaha, Gehry, Kazuya Sejima, able to go all over the world and to basically drop their signature work in a sort of neo-colonial practice. And so that was super exciting back then. And so the world of London was a very expansive world. And to work with engineers in the UK, but also in Italy and also in Germany, meant that you had access to other cultures, and they were all extremely exacting with their work. They worked at with such close margins and with such high standards that the work came out looking beautiful. Here in the States, the other culture is, we cannot compete with AECom, which is, a global brand that numbers in the thousands for employees, or HOK or SOMs. So there's a certain scale that we're at. However, Mariana and I certainly have larger ambitions than this. So we have been playing as if we're an office 4 times bigger than what we are. And we do this through hustle, and we do this through brashness, but we always pretend that we're a much larger office and that we can do many scales. So recently, in China, we tried to do this competition with an LDI there for a train station. At the same time, we're doing a standalone residential project in Canada. At the same time, we're doing research on concrete that can talk. So these are the scales of production that we are unafraid to do at any given moment, knowing full well that if we go in this direction and we continually push ourselves, we will eventually get higher than where we are right now. Because if you aim for something that is 1 million miles away and 100 miles in the air, whatever you aim for, you might not hit it, but you will get something very good than where your horizon lies. And so, and we have the ability, like the work that Mariana and I did for others, for Zaha, for Frank Gehry, for Arab's AGU. We still maintain that knowledge base within us. It's now a matter of getting the cachet of the office to match our capacity. Well, okay, so if I can speak of my life generally, the hardest part of my life was a motorcycle accident that happened when I was 27 years old. I was hit by a car in Red Rock. And I broke my neck, I broke my arm, and I broke my leg. And so I was crippled. I had it's something called an external fixator to keep my bones together. I still have a stainless steel humeral shaft in this arm. And I was very lucky to not have to get the cage for my vertebrae. But it took about 1 year to recover. So it was a nasty accident. I still love motorcycles, and I sometimes still dream about riding. There's nothing else like riding a sports bike. And this happened when I was working as an architect in Las Vegas. So I was in the hospital for weeks, and then it took about a year with physical therapy and continual checkups with my orthopedic surgeons. So I had a different surgeon for my neck, I had a different surgeon for my arm, and a different surgeon for my leg. So it was a continuous circus of maintaining Simon Kim. And I had to thank 2 very close friends of mine who looked after me at that time, because I wasn't able to work. I wasn't able to really get around. So that's not an easy situation. But then I got back, and every day of that year, I had to tell myself, I'm gonna do it. I can do it. Every day I have to wake up and see that I'm in pain constantly and say, I'm going to do it. Whatever it takes to go through therapy, whatever it takes I had the swelling of the brain. I had to get a CAT scan. I lost my sight for a few days because of the massive amount of the concussion that I had. And so every day I had to tell myself, I can do it. And then once I was able to walk normally again, that's when I applied for the AA. I also took all my exams. So while I was limping around, not able to run, not able to walk properly, really weak, I took all my exams in that time. So I got through, back then it was 9 exams. I got through all 9 exams in 4 or 5 months. Every 2 weeks, I was scheduling a licensing exam. So I told myself I can do it, and I made it happen. So that was both the worst time in my life. It was super dark, really tough, but also it defined everything, because now I can see that whatever I'm going through, it's nowhere as bad as what that was. And I have the ability to say that I can do it. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm telling a stupid story, but I really, in hard moments, I will always think back on that, because there were so many opportunities for me to say, I'm just gonna stay as I am, right? Maybe I won't walk properly, it'll be fine.
And looking forward, do you think it's anything?
Yeah. Looking into the future, I want to see Ibañez Kim grow. I want to support Mariana with her position at the UCLA. I mean, how amazing, no, that she's got that. And be a good father. You know, I wasn't looking to be a father. I thought I was going to spend my whole life just climbing the architecture game of death, like Bruce Lee. But now that I am a father, I want to make sure that they grow up, knowing love and being able to make good decisions wherever they go. There's there's many things I've learned from Mariana, but the 2 things are the difficulties of being a woman in architecture, and then also the disenfranchisement of South American architects from the world scene. And to see that the work that happens in South America may not make it to Japan or to New York or to the other epicenters of global design discussions. But I find that to be unfortunate, because I believe that South American architecture is amazing. No, like if we look at the mission statement of CM, right, and how in the 30s they decided they were going to take their modernist European style and value system and just shove it anywhere they can find. North Africa, Sao Paulo, any place that would accept it. I think that South America took modernism and invented something that has so much to do with tactility and materials that it is amazing to see. So, I don't know if you've ever been to Buenos Aires, but the work of Clorindo Testa, I don't know where else in the world that I've seen anything of that imagination and that kind of that spirit of just go for it, And it's not just his work that it's so gymnastic, but there's other smaller projects that are being done by friends that I've met in Argentina. That they do work that is as communicable of beautiful species of spaces as anyone in Europe, anyone. So I find that to be unfortunate, but I also think that it's that pocket is just going to become incredible. So I don't know if you feel the same. Certainly, I recognize that it's hard to be global if no one thinks you're global, right? I think Los Angeles is also an epicenter. We don't know Los Angeles well. We know quite a few people well. Mariana has a lot of camaraderie with the Argentines who are locally based. Certainly, they're very powerful. So that's been our entry point, and we have other friends as well. I think that the one thing with Los Angeles that I'm excited to explore is its proximity to Asia. So, when I work with LDIs in China, or when I'm trying to get my foot in the door to South Korean architectural firms, I hope and I believe that being based in Los Angeles will be helpful in that regard, so that I can quickly make it out to Beijing or Seoul or Hong Kong.